Welcome to National Single Payer. My name is Kay Tillow, and National Single Payer is a national grassroots organization that organizes locally in the struggle for national single payer health care. We are united by the common principles that healthcare is a human right. It must be free from corporate profit, and it must be achieved through national legislation. If you would like to support our work, please donate to our organization. We will periodically drop a link in the chat that you can click and donate throughout tonight's event. Our speaker will speak for approximately 30 minutes, more or less, after which Dr. Judy Albert will ask the questions that you posted in the Q&A. And we do need to end this by 9 o'clock Eastern because our speaker has another commitment. Sarah Nelson is a union leader with the courage to think big. She is the one who, as she accepted the 2019 AFL-CIO Martin Luther King Jr. Drum Major for Justice Award, she called for union members to speak to their union leadership about conducting a general strike to end the government shutdown, which was a crisis for all of us and for millions of workers. That bold call had an impact. The shutdown ended shortly thereafter. Many credit Sarah Nelson for a major accomplishment. She is America's most powerful flight attendant. That's what the New York Times says. I'm sure it's more than true. She has served as the international president of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, AFL-CIO, since 2014. She first became a union member in 1996 when she was hired by United Airlines, and today represents over 50,000 of aviation's first responders at 19 airlines. She's been a leading voice for workers' rights and a strong supporter of healthcare as a human right and Medicare for all, free from corporate profit. I'm honored to welcome Sarah Nelson.
Thank you so much, Kay, and thank you to Single Payer for keeping this fight alive. It is really important that we are keeping this in the forefront of people's thoughts. And as this presidential primary season has been unlike others that we've seen in the past, we're not seeing as many issues rise up that we can talk about that are urgent issues for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, for the ability to live a full and healthy life. And so it's really important that National Single Payer is keeping this out front and keeping us focused on the fight for healthcare for all, because it is a human right, and it needs to be recognized as such. And I just want to start by saying that it is great to be on a call with women who are fighting across the board. I think that it is really important you recognize that the New York Times called me America's most powerful flight attendant, which I can't help but giggle about a little bit, because 28 years ago I did become a union flight attendant. And I know because of my first day on the job, a flying partner of 35 years pulled me to the side and she said, "Listen," and her voice was a little raspy because we had only recently beat big tobacco and getting smoking out of our workplace. And so she had been subject to secondhand smoke most of her career. But she said, "Listen, management thinks of us as their wives or their mistresses. And in either case, they hold us in contempt. Your only place of worth is with your fellow flying partners." And I have to tell you, the first part of this at 23, fresh out of company training, not knowing anything about unions or anything, was a little rough. But that last part about your only place of worth is with your fellow flying partners caught my ear a little bit. And then she said, "If we stick together, there's nothing we can't accomplish." My first day on the job. And so if we stick together, there's nothing we can't accomplish. And what I've learned over the last 28 years is that you have to define the problem. We have to keep speaking up about this cruel, irrational, ridiculous, wasteful, for-profit healthcare system in order to define our demands. Single payer, healthcare treated as a human right, policy with healthcare as a human right, and then back up those demands with what we're willing to do. We're going to keep talking about this. We're going to keep organizing. We're going to support workers organizing because we have to have more people understanding that we have more in common than anything that could divide us. Women, I want to get back to this. We have to work with urgency. Not only is our healthcare under attack, our own agency, our freedom is under attack. This is something that we can all recognize. I was born in 1973. I was born with rights that many of you fought for. And I'm not really willing to go backward. It is urgent that we fight right now for healthcare as a human right that is directly tied to our rights as women to speak up, to lead, and to lead forward with love. So that's what I was taught from the beginning of my career. But 5 years into my career, I really understood that we don't just operate in a democracy, which is a beautiful thing and a beautiful idea. It's with the backdrop of capitalism. And capitalism doesn't give a crap about people, doesn't care about people. But from the beginning of capitalism, there have been efforts to try to diminish women's power, because if you can cut off the power of half of the working class, that is the strongest first move to deny the working class and the people of this country the rights that we are promised. And so the attacks on women, the attacks on our own free choice to decide to do what we want to do with our bodies is directly tied to our fight for healthcare as a human right. I have a really, really good friend who battled a really aggressive cancer. And she was a flight attendant. Another flight attendant was diagnosed with the same form of cancer, and he was gone in 6 months. And there wasn't really a cure for this. She was only told, we might be able to treat you in a way that will extend your life. She was 30 years old. And she said to me, Sarah, don't tell anyone, because I can't go through this treatment. I can't face this disease if I have to face one single person who looks at me and says, how are you doing today? And looks at me as though they have pity on me. I can't do it. My doctors told me my best chance is to keep a positive outlook, to believe that I can be healed. And I can't do that if people are looking at me with pity. So this idea that we have a healthcare plan, a for-profit healthcare plan that makes people have to go to GoFundMe pages to be able to get the funds that they need to be able to get the treatment, that we have people who second guess whether or not they should go get checked out, because if they do, they might get the diagnosis that is going to bankrupt their family. This is cruel. It's untenable, and it's getting worse by the day. I told you I was born in 1973. I've had some health issues in recent years. I had 2 hip replacements. I'm here to tell you that certainly our healthcare plan is not built for women. There's no one looking at the whole woman when they're treating a part of a woman. And it is a healthcare system that is designed just like I have experienced as a union leader, facing the bankruptcies after 9/11 and the attacks on our contracts that we had built up over 80 years, attacks on our healthcare, attacks on retiree healthcare, attacks on our time with our families, on making us work more, attacks on our retirement security, taking away our pensions. That I see that. I see all of those cost savings measures and redefining of the value of a flight attendant. On those corporate balance sheets. That's what I am. I'm just a line item. And we learned during COVID that not only are we just a line item, we're also a disposable line item. They're willing to send us out into the most dangerous conditions and not give us the equipment to protect ourselves. So we have to understand what this system of capitalism is designed to do. It's designed to extract the most profits possible. And there's two ways to do that. You can increase revenue, you can cut costs. And you can cut costs on the backs of people, and you can cut back costs on the backs of those people's lives, their time with their family, and their quality of lives, and their ability to drink clean water and breathe clean air. All of those things are for sale in capitalism. And if we don't put a check on that, if we don't organize together and demand better, it'll just keep pushing that way further and further. So what I experienced while I was going through these 2 hip replacements and all of the various things that happened after that, because of the medications I was taking, because I was entering menopause, and nobody's looking at the whole woman once again. What I saw was more and more siloing of work in the healthcare industry, and more cost cutting, fewer and fewer people who are able to even clean the hospitals, make sure that we have the resources that we need, make sure we have the staffing that we need, making it so hard on nurses that they can't stand to stay in the profession, that they're quitting because it is too hard to do that job, to try to save people's lives, to try to give people comfort and not have the tools to be able to do it, and to know that you're looking people in the face, knowing that you could do more if that hospital or if that healthcare company was willing to just invest in the proper resources to be able to do it, to be able to do our jobs. People are quitting these professions because they can't do the work, because capitalism is choking people out. They're choking the patients and they're choking the caregivers. And that's where we are. That's why it's urgent that we continue to make this a number 1 priority for us. Now, I'm going to just read you a quote that really caught my attention a few years ago when I read it, when I was doing a little research. And I'll see if you can tell me if it was recent or in our past. I think that all of us are aware of the fact that we live in a very difficult time in the history of America. This is truly a time for testing the values that we believe in as a free people. It is a time of revolutionary change, of challenge, and of deep crises in many aspects of our national life. We have a crisis in our cities. We have a crisis in education. We are polluting our air and water. Our living environment is deteriorating dangerously. We have a crisis in housing, and one of the most serious crises we face in the area of healthcare services. The cost of healthcare is skyrocketing. It represents the most inflationary single factor in the upward movement of the price index. The cost of medical care over the past decade has risen at almost twice the rate of movement of the general price index. We spend more money in total and a larger percentage of our gross national product for healthcare than any other nation in the world. Yet despite this, we have not provided the American people with the kind of comprehensive, high-quality healthcare services that we have the knowledge and affluence to provide. Now, that quote could have been from yesterday, but it was October 14th, 1969 that Walter Reuther said that. And he said that when he was battling the auto companies to go with him arm in arm to Washington, D.C. to fight for national health care so that companies wouldn't have to provide that. It was a great idea for those companies. And when the company said, we're not going to do that because that sounds like socialism, he said, that's okay. I'm going to take it from you. And so the idea that we negotiated in union contracts, and only if you have a union job can you have good health care, I want to just be very clear, is an extremely outmoded idea. It was the beginning of the idea that Walter Reuther gave us, that we could all have secure health care to take care of ourselves and our family and to be able to live good and whole lives in exchange for our contributions to society. So we got that in those auto worker contracts, and we set a standard for the working class in America through those contracts. And we organized off the backs of those contracts. And then the capitalists came for those contracts, they came for those unions, and they came for the very idea that we as a people could set the agenda and actually make sure that our government is set up to work for us. And it's only recently that it has become so incredibly broken that people saw during the pandemic that not only are we thought of as a cost item, but we're thought of as expendable. And they're willing to kill us for profits. I know this as a union leader, a little anxious about my members going out on Boeing aircraft right now. So we're in a time when we're organizing like crazy, when people understand that this is a which side are you on moment. And we have to fight against all of the efforts to tell all of us that we're at odds with each other. We couldn't have any more in common than we do right now. It's very clear. Wages have remained flat. Productivity has gone through the roof. Healthcare has gotten more and more expensive. And those contracts that Walter Reuther negotiated and set a standard for the rest of every single industry and every single union to negotiate in those contracts, the ones that we won in the late 60s and 70s and early 80s, every time we have gone to the table since then, it hasn't been about improving that healthcare. It hasn't been about expanding that healthcare. It has been about trying to diminish the costs that would be transferred to workers from the corporations for that healthcare. It has been about diminishing what is defined as coverage for that healthcare. The issues that you can be treated for. And so as unions have declined, the standard of that healthcare has declined, and we have never reached the dream that Walter Reuther had, which was to set the standard in those union contracts so that we would demand it for everyone, so that we could demand it for everyone, so that people could see that you could actually take care of yourself and your family and not have to lose your home in order to do so, not to have to bankrupt your family, not to have to sentence your family to a life of debt just to save a life. So we're at the table right now, flight attendants across the country. And I have to say, I was drawn to this job because my friend called me from a beach in Miami with her toes in the sand as I was working 4 jobs and staring at my student loans and thinking about becoming a first-year teacher, setting up my classroom with my own money because the education system was not going to give me the resources I needed to take care of my students. And she called me with her toes in the sand, and she explained to me the life she was living as a flight attendant with a union contract, the pay that was going to be more than my first year as a teacher, the healthcare that I would have, the flexibility that I would have on the job, and the ability to retire with a pension as early as age 50. And that got me to drive to Chicago the next day and interview with United Airlines. And when she described that healthcare to me, it wasn't just healthcare in general and coverage. It was healthcare that had been negotiated for and demanded by a strong group of women. So it would be coverage that was specific to the issues that I was going to face as a woman. And this is the dream that we can have for everyone. But they came for this. They came for this 5 years later when those planes flew into the buildings. I lost my friends. And we lost our contracts. But we didn't lose our ability to fight. And because we fought, they wanted to take retiree health care. But we put up a huge fight. We saved retiree health care. And we doubled the amount that they were willing to spend on our pension replacement plan. And we learned that when you fight, you're strong enough to fight forward. And people know that when you fight, you can win. And so I want all of you to know that a lot of people can say that this is a lost cause, that this has been a dream for too long. And we don't have it in us to fight anymore. We don't have any choice but to fight. Because the capitalists say there is no need of labor organizing. This is Mother Jones from 100 years ago when she was fighting child labor. She said, the capitalists say there is no need of labor organizing, except the fact that they themselves are continually organizing shows us their real beliefs. The capitalists want the most amount of labor for the least amount of money, and labor wants the most amount of money for the least amount of labor. And we should be proud of that with advancements in technology, including in our healthcare industry. If you would only understand that you hold the solution to the whole problem in your hand. If, for example, in every industry, people were just to hold up and stop working, the capitalists would yield to any and all demands because the world could simply not go on. So we have to define for people urgently what the problem is, and people are seeing it with their own eyes more and more. They're experiencing it in their families. They're hurting. We have to open our arms wide, encourage women to step up and lead with heart and love. And we have to help the capitalists understand what we're willing to do if they don't concede to our demands. And there is a tipping point on that. And we can't lose heart that people are going to see that. And I see it now more clearly than I have seen it in 28 years. People are waking up to the power that we have when we stand together. I'll go back to this. They want us to believe that we're divided. But I think of the mine workers who were organizing in the early 1900s, who had no rights at all, whose lives were thought of as less than the donkeys that were carrying the coal out of the mines. And they were purposely hired as immigrants, speaking 28 different languages, for example, in Ludlow, Colorado. And the mine owners hired immigrants from different countries, hoping that they couldn't speak with each other about forming a union. But when the mine explodes and the people living in the company shacks next to each other have to comfort their children and say, their father's not coming home, or their brother who went into the mine with their father to help carry the coal out because they were paid on the load, not on the time that they spent in the mine getting that coal out of the mine. When people have to comfort their families and try to help them see how they can possibly move on with so much heartache and loss, you don't have to speak the same language. The hearts are speaking together. That's where we are with our healthcare. This is the stories that we have to tell. We have to connect with each other and understand that against all odds, against the company thugs who sent the Baldwin Felts out to fire into those mine tents when they were on strike, who put the guns up against bodies, who are willing to beat people, who are willing to use violence against workers who are just demanding their fair due. Against all odds, they rose up and built the strongest union in America and helped to set the standard and helped to build the United Auto Workers that led to Walter Reuther giving us that dream of healthcare for all. And so we have to finish the job. And the last thing I'll just say about that is that I have every confidence in the world that it's not going to be the dream from the men's words that I just read, but it's going to be the demand from the women's hearts that make it happen. I'm really happy to be here with all of you tonight. Excited to get to your questions.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. That was just the best and impassioned pathway through your history as a labor member, and citing some of the most important stories that have been told about the damage that our healthcare system is doing to people, working people especially. And so without further ado, I'm going to move into the questions, because I think we will have a lot of discussion. And so first of all, this sort of trend is coming up in a lot of people's questions. We have seen that in the past, we had as many as 600 endorsements from labor, from leaders and labor unions for the previous Medicare for All bill, HR 676. And those endorsements have now gone away, and labor unions are selling Medicare Advantage plans and advocating for them as well. So at this point, what can rank and file workers and local unions, national unions do to promote improved Medicare for All at this time when the politics of our country, just as you have described in the reproductive issues for women, both of those things are moving backwards? How can we reverse course on this?
Thank you for the question. So first of all, there is, who do the capitalists have to listen to? Nobody. Who do the billionaires have to listen to? Nobody but the union leader who organizes at their shop. And that is with the power of everyone standing together. So we are seeing across industries the same fight everywhere. The fight for continuing healthcare without transitioning those costs, the fight to retain retirement security, the fight for our own time and our own ability to control our schedules, and the fight for a living wage. In addition to that, and directly tied to that, is the fight for the right to safe housing and an education that doesn't put you into debt forever. So these are common issues across the working class. And the way for the working class to fight back is to build that power in the workplace. Voting is really important, but voting isn't important if you're not also doing what you need to do to back up the people that you're trying to elect, to make sure that you have clear demands, and also to make sure that we're getting money out of our politics. Right now, money is controlling our politics. So what do we have to do? We have to organize. We have to attack where that money is. In the private sector organizing is critical in order to be able to take on all of the entire Bill of Economic Rights that FDR imagined. I should say Francis Perkins imagined and put into the mouth of FDR. And we have unfinished business here. So the reason that you see unions retreating is because when there is this idea of scarcity, people will retreat from those big ideas. My union flying partner of 35 years on my first day, who told me that if we stick together, there's nothing we can't accomplish. There was this recognition that no one was going to lay down the path for us, that we actually had to have that agency as women to control our union too, just to make sure that our issues were heard. And there's been a lot of talk in unions throughout the years about what's better, a craft union that focuses on the specific job, or an industrial union that focuses on one big union and the idea that we're all in this together. Well, we have to all be in this together, but we also have to make sure that everyone's at the table when we're all in this together. So So it's really important that we have people rising up in the unions that exist and in the unions that we want to form. The organizing that's going on really has to be supported, but we have to encourage young people. We have to encourage women. We have to encourage people of color. We have to encourage anyone who has been marginalized to stand up and be a leader in those unions and to organize that workplace and take on those leadership roles, because we need those voices and the ability to recognize that we may not understand everything. When you have come from a position of being marginalized, of being discriminated against, you often have to be very creative about getting solutions. It doesn't mean that you're less focused on getting those solutions. It just means that the path to get the solution is a little bit more winding. Mm-hmm. And that takes a lot of courage. It also takes a lot of fortitude. And a commitment, and it also takes creativity. And so what I'm trying to say here is that unions had become very, I should say union leaders have become very enamored with their own irrelevance. And when you're irrelevant, and a union is not really at the forefront of the conversation, people don't ask questions. They don't ask to see what's happening because they're not interested in it. Labor reporters became a thing of the past. Today, though, because of union organizing in the media space, every single reporter out there is a labor reporter. That many of them have been through their own fight to be able to join a union and negotiate their own contract in their workspace. So more and more people are more aware of the fights of a more diverse population of workers and the fights that we're going through. That is important, but it's also important that we are not just thinking of unions as a thing of the past and of a vision of what we think a union member was from the past. I really appreciate the training that I got from my mentors who trained me within the Association of Flight Attendants, that we had the ability, when we stuck together, that was stronger than sexism. That was stronger than sexual harassment and sexual assault. That was stronger than any attempts to try to say that we were the girls in back and we shouldn't be at the table. We got results because we stuck together. Now, if you share that with the rest of the working class and actually share that idea and that power, that is a powerful idea to be drawn to. And so we're starting to see the roots of that. And I have said this many times in the last 6 months. I've been to a couple events with Shawn Fain from the United Auto Workers. And I said, for a long time, I've said, women, join unions and run unions. Young people, people of color, we need your creativity. We need your leadership. And I've been preaching that for a long time. And little did I know that the people who rose up in their union and demanded a direct membership election, and that the workers would actually have the voice and the ownership of their union, would send me a 55-year-old grandfather from Central Indiana. What were you thinking? But we all have to check our own biases too, because there can be leaders anywhere when the people speak. And sure enough, we have an example of what can happen when workers actually take over their unions, organize their unions, make it a living, breathing organization that is always attempting to grow, to learn, to grow bigger, to get the ideas bigger. And I said to Shawn Fain recently, I said, we're going to get single payer healthcare. And he said, yeah, that's one of the things we're going to get, Sarah. And so I know I've rambled on for a long time, but what I'm trying to say here is that we can't just let unions sort of sit as those institutions. The institutions are important because as you have the swings and the ups and downs in the economy and in the ebb and flow of the national narrative and the international narrative for that matter, you have to have institutions that can withstand all of that. So that's important. But unions are not institutions. It's the hearts and souls of the people who are in those unions that make them what they are. And so when those beating hearts actually take action and take ownership of the power of that union, then they're going to naturally demand the things that we've been talking about here that everyone sees as a problem. Even doctors today say we need healthcare for all, right? So I would just encourage everyone to lift up that organizing and that new organizing spirit, and the idea that that any person who is diminished or discriminated against, that an injury to one is an injury to all. If we take that spirit out, then that's actually the spirit that is going to win not only the idea of healthcare for all, but it is going to prod the power that is necessary to get it done. So again, a long and rambly way of saying, please go out and support that union organizing. If you think that you don't deserve a union in your workplace, think again and think about how to get one. Because we all have to be connected. We all have to be engaging in a place where we actually have the ownership of the democracy. And right now, our democracy is being held by capital. We have to build the power to be able to combat that and put a check on that, and actually elect people who feel the power of the people when they get into those positions. There are good people who run for these positions, but out of necessity have to think they have to take money from the very people who are putting our lives on the line to have for-profit healthcare. And when someone takes money from these groups, at some point, they're going to do what the people who gave them the money want them to do. So we have to battle that, and we have to be strong enough to be able to battle that. And we have to give people the idea that they don't have to give in to the people with money. They can give in to the people who are battling for good lives and are battling for their families and are battling for their communities. And the idea in our hearts and soul and in our minds, and carried as a principle that we live with, that an injury to one is an injury to all. And so I'm seeing it start to change. I want to give you that hope. And I just want to emphasize how important it is to keep it up and to know that there is no end to that fight either. Capitalists are going to keep on organizing. We have to keep on fighting.
That is just a wonderful way of moving into some of these other questions. We're so excited to hear what you're saying. And we've been really excited as single payer organizers, thinking that Shawn Fain and the UAW are also on the side of Medicare for all. And so one of the things that we've seen with the publicity about UAW and Shawn Fain is that he has expressed concerns that a two-tiered system of benefits for retirees is going to be very difficult to solve at the bargaining table and needs some sort of federal action. I'm wondering, what do you think about that, and about the projection of a general strike on May Day of 2028?
So, okay, a couple things. First of all, two-tiered systems, we have to understand from the start, are an attack on all of us. Because and we have seen this over and over again. We have actually outlawed it under our union constitution. We cannot bargain anything that is disparate pay or benefits for any particular group. And that's because it comes back to haunt you. How do you ever build the power to change anything when one group has something that the other group doesn't? They're trying to fight to hang on to what they have. The other group doesn't have it. Why would they fight for the people who have something that they don't have? It naturally divides the power of that bargaining unit to be able to push forward, and actually pushes the bargaining unit backward. And Shawn Fain talked about this when he was a local rep early on, and back in 2008, when there was an attempt to make a different tiered system of employees. And he said at the time, you may as well go out and shoot yourself in the head. It's the same thing as agreeing to this. And so it is going to be incredibly difficult because of the dynamics that I just described to be able to solve that at the bargaining table. Because at the bargaining table, you have to have common demands and you have to have everyone behind those demands. And the fact that UAW this time was able to keep up the demand of getting rid of the tiered employment for pay was huge, because that meant that you had to have the person who was going to get a lesser raise actually fight for the person who was going to get 160% raise because they were that far behind. And it meant that you had to have workers who were currently working be willing to fight for people who are on a fixed income and have had their retirement attacked, so that you could build up that retirement too. And so I would say that I agree with Sean that we have to have the federal government step in on this, except that he has shown us that when you spread that spirit of solidarity and you help people understand where our power comes from and what harms our power, when we allow these divisive tactics to take hold, that you can actually organize through that. And I think that we're also seeing that with the organizing that's happening in the South. So that is a long way to talk about the general idea of a general strike on May 1st of 2028 and aligning contracts so that that right to strike is hitting at the same time, and we can actually put forward these common demands. But I have often said, I mean, people get excited about the general strike and just the idea of the power of that. And I think it's important to sit in the idea of that power, because a lot of people have felt despair, and the union busters, I call it the 4Ds of union busting: divide, delay, distract, and demoralize. The union busters' favorite D is demoralize, because that means that people aren't even paying attention. They've gone into their hole. They don't even think that fighting will help. So they don't even take part, don't even want to know anything about it, are just keeping the hood over their heads. And so the idea that there could be a general strike is exciting to people because they realize the living reality of that Mother Jones quote, that if every industry were to simply hold up, if people were to just put their hands in their pockets at the same time, that we could achieve all of the demands that we want and we have defined. And so it is important to plan for that idea that we would all go out together. But the strike is our tactic, solidarity is our power. And solidarity resides within those demands to lift up ourselves and all of humanity around us. And so Medicare for all, single payer, I try not to use Medicare for all now because Medicare has been so attacked that people who are on it say, why would we want this for everyone? So it was a great term to help people conceptualize what we wanted to achieve. But I think that's why I appreciate talking about single payer so that we don't get stuck in those talking points. But this demand is one of the demands that is clearly already defined, and is going to be a demand for May 1st of 2028. And will it happen then, or might it happen sooner if people understand that we have that power and can conceptualize it, because we're talking about the idea of that, and we're already talking about defining the problem and defining our demands about what it is. I didn't think that Trump was going to go as far as he did in shutting the government down to try to dismantle all of the government and try to keep us distracted by saying it was about a southern border wall, when really it was about a 50-year attack on our government and our social services and everything that we count on with the structure of that government. I didn't know that there was going to be a moment where we could express that power together during that shutdown, but that's exactly what happened. We never know when these moments are going to come. So we have to be constantly organized and understand what our demands are for that moment. And to put out that idea of May 1st of 2028 is something that we should all be talking about, because the moment may come before then that we have to act. And when we act, the tipping point will come where they not only agree to what's on the table right at that moment, but if we have the demands clearly defined for the entire working class and all of us already defined, we can demand those things too. We didn't have to just demand that railroad workers had the right to strike. We could have demanded over the fact that they needed paid sick days. We could have demanded that the entire population should be entitled to paid sick days if we had understood that that fight was our fight too. So I think that May 1st, 2028 is incredibly important, not only to organize for and make sure that we're continually organizing for that and being ready, but also for the idea that it generates now and the work that you are doing right here on single payer to define the demands so that we're ready to go with those demands when that moment meets us, and we're ready to meet it with the power of our solidarity.
Since you mentioned not using Medicare for all, I think that's something that we struggle with and embrace also with our national single payer name. And I wanted to bring up a thread that many people are asking in the Q&A, which is about the largest unions attempting to push retirees into Medicare Advantage. And this is one of the reasons why Medicare is getting that negative connotation that some people feel we need to move away from. And one of the concerns of a questioner is that in New York City, the largest unions have been involved in attempting to push retirees into Medicare Advantage and have been in opposition to Medicare for all. So how do we get those unions to move in a different direction and to recognize that Medicare Advantage is Medicare disadvantage?
Well, first of all, I think that it's really important not to put a label on the union on the whole and think of the union members as being aligned with the position that the union leaders are taking. And so I think it's really important to ask the question, is that really the position of the union members in that union? And the union members who are experiencing this and seeing in their communities how it's working or not working, I would really question whether or not that's actually a representation of the members of that union who should be owning that union. And I think that it's really important that we get our arms around the people who are feeling like they're being misrepresented, and call that out for what it is. I mean, it's a selling out of union members and their families, and being very clear about that, and being clear that we don't have to settle for something less when we organize to come together to demand something more. And it's bizarre to me to have that kind of power and outsource that power to the for-profit system in order to get something in return that is less than what you had before,
right,
for the people who are organizing. So I think I'll say it right here and right now that is unions that have lost their way. I don't agree with it. I completely disagree with it. I'm opposed to that position. I think it hurts our solidarity. It hurts care for ourselves and our communities. And it sells out the people that we are here and charged to protect. So I think that all of us have to get our arms around that and recognize that we shouldn't just say that those unions are taking that position. I think that we really need to make it very clear that the leaders are making that decision, and have them explain that decision, not only to their members, but to everyone else, because I don't think it's explainable.
Right. Another question, moving into unionizing of healthcare workers. Do you have any thoughts on organizing healthcare workers in an industry that traditionally has not had much union penetrance? And also, the question was raised about healthcare workers striking in May of 2028 as well.
Yeah. A lot of people struggle with this, but we have seen some amazingly inspirational strikes by nurses in recent years. St. Vincent's in Worcester. I mean, during the pandemic, to strike for 9 months, and to strike, they were striking over patient care. They were very clear that they were striking to be able to do their jobs and to be able to care for their patients. And so I think that a lot of times there will be an effort to try to tell us that we are not a professional if we're willing to strike for the respect of the work that we do. And in fact, we need to turn that on its head. It's a little bit like these Southern governors saying that the UAW is coming down and they're going to wreck the Southern economy. And Shawn Fain saying, hell yeah, we're going to wreck your economy and we're going to build one up that works for working people. Absolutely, it's wrong. I'm just going to say that we have to get our arms around the people who are in these unions, tell these stories, and be able to push forward, because we have to remember every single day that we have way more in common than anything that could divide us. And if we see a leader falling for the traps of those 4Ds of the union busters, then that's the union buster at work. That's not even that union leader. And we've got to free them of that and help them see that they've got a whole army of people either behind them or ready to take them out if they're not going to take the proper position that represents the people.
So,
yeah. And so healthcare workers,
ahead.
I'm sorry. So within that, I think it's really important that we're helping nurses really understand that when you're taking a strong position and you're willing to strike, that is for the love of yourself, your families, and your patients. That is for the love of the pride that you take in the work that you do. And we have to welcome people into that. A lot of times what I will see is that even within our own ranks, when we're preparing for a strike, we'll have leaders say, oh, don't ask the new flight attendants to do that. Well, what the hell kind of career are we fighting for if it's not for the people who are just starting it? Of course, welcome them in, and they have power when they stand with the rest of us. Why would you not invite them to experience that power and be a part of that? And I'll be very clear about something else too. When this corporate elite understand that workers understand our power and that we're going to stand together and do this, the strikes are not going to be as long. The strikes are likely not going to happen. It's the credible strike threat and all of us standing together, not questioning that and being willing to do that and showing people what we're willing to do that will lead us to the solutions that we all thought were impossible before.
I so appreciate it. I think everybody on the call appreciates your calling the distinction between leadership in labor and the workers who are the ones that probably wouldn't be making some of these decisions. And many questioners are wondering what exactly needs to happen for unions to take the lead. You mentioned creative solutions. Does labor have a roadmap? What can you do to help get Medicare for all, improved, expanded Medicare for all? And that's probably going to be the last question because we are about at 8:55.
Okay.
Just an easy question, right?
Yeah, it's an easy one. Does labor have a roadmap? Labor has not had a roadmap. No, labor in total has not had a roadmap. I think I'm starting to see the first signs of labor understanding our power and this new organizing that's taking shape and the desire for, and let me be very clear, the labor movement is not just the people who are already in unions. It's actually all of the people who are not in unions who want to join and want to be a part of that power. So the roadmap really, I think that Shawn Fain started to define it actually with that May 1st, 2028 date to essentially put the corporate elite on notice. Like that's the day. If it doesn't come sooner, that's the day of reckoning. And organizing toward that is really important. But in the meantime, all of these organizing campaigns, lifting that up, helping people see that they can have unions in spaces where they didn't think they could have them before. I have my Congressional Workers Union pin on here. Congressional workers didn't think that they could have a voice because they were working for the representatives. And in fact, the offices that have the Congressional Workers Union are often the highest functioning offices. But so the roadmap really is organizing the hell out of every single industry, lifting up every single organizing campaign, not saying that baristas are not a strategic organizing target, because baristas are the reason that we have workers organizing everywhere and feeling their power in every industry, because they gave us something to see and believe in.
Yep.
So anyway, that is really the roadmap to build the power that we need in order to get capital to concede to the demands that we have. And we have to use this moment to make the most out of it in every way that we can. There are certain moments on the calendar that we know of. The elections matter. They don't matter, frankly, as much as the union organizing, but they are a moment where we're going to decide what kind of turf we're fighting on. And that matters. Because if people have a better ability to fight, they're more likely to fight. If people have a little bit more in their pockets, they're more likely to fight. In the issue of climate, I think about this. The capitalists are hoping that we won't get our act together in time and that we'll be choking on air that we can't breathe. So we're willing to accept the very least in this moment. And we can't wait until then. So we have to lift up this organizing in every way that we can and encourage people that are not, don't look like they came from central casting of the union members of the past, lead this moment, and lead this organizing and lead forward with the idea that when we stick together, there's nothing we can't accomplish. And that's just the truth. Like, spread the good word, like, it's the best new church. And and come in fellowship together in solidarity, and let's get it done. And I bet you Dr. Cohen has a few good words for us to take us home on that.
All
Go
right.
for it, Claire.
Okay. So thank you, Sarah. It was a really inspiring talk. And I want to also thank everyone who joined our presentation. And you couldn't see them, Sarah, but we had a lot of questions.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so maybe you'll be able to come back sometime, because I'm serious. We had 27 questions in the Q&A, and more questions in the chat. So we had a lot. As I said, my name is Dr. Claire Cohen. I'm host of a podcast called The Real McCoy in Healthcare, which I might invite you on, Sarah, sometime. I'm trying to get more labor on it. And if you'd like to support our work, please donate to National Single Payer. Use the link in the chat to donate. You can also go to our website, www.nationalsinglepayer, all one word, .com, to sign up for our email list and our monthly newsletter, where you will find registration links for all our webinars, where we do lots of webinars and working group meetings. Join us Wednesday, April 25th at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time for our next working group session. The registration link is in the chat. Among the things we are working on is a trip to Cuba, so to look at their healthcare system. Save the date, Wednesday, May 8th, for our next educational webinar, which is called Don't Bust Up Medicare and Hand It to the States. And the people talking are going to be Kay Tillow and me, Dr. Claire Cohen. So thanks again for being here, and hope to see you for the second and fourth Wednesdays next month. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. It was wonderful.
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you, Sarah. You were great. Looking forward
Thank
to
you
working
all.
together, I hope.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for
Good
your good
night,
work.
everybody.
Good
All
night.
right.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.